Good evening, everybody. This is, of course, when I'm terrified that the sound won't work. Does your county have a cool anthem? No, I thought not. No anthem for you, 'cause your county is shit. So I thought we need an introduction, because this is a bit more formal than some other streams. Anyway, good evening and welcome to Aubrey's Storytime. My name is Aubrey Blakeledge. I am a comedian, attempted singer-songwriter. I'm not really a singer-songwriter, I don't wear jeans. But I am a musician, lead singer from the Sweet Chunks band, and I'm also a storyteller, raconteur, occasional woodland goth, and forest spirit and strange person that does things. What this stream is a regular little stream of some of the stories that I've come across on my travels, whether it be in some of the songs that I've written, some of the performances I've done, some of the strange conversations I've had with delightfully weird people in pubs, round fires, or in the back of a car at 3 a.m, whilst slightly intoxicated. These are quite often is where the best stories lie. Before we kick off, just a little precursor. I am not a historian. I am deliberately putting myself in the world of legend, myth, and other such bollocks, because I do believe, as much as we do need people telling you the truth and telling you facts and such things, I also believe there is a healthy space for bullshit, because that's where the myths live, that's where the legends are, and having an open mind to understand the differences and enjoying the differences is a good thing. So, with that in mind, some of the stories I tell are utter bollocks. Some of them, in fact a lot of them, in fact most of them, have a grain of truth, an interesting grain of truth that is worth investigating in your spare time. I will give you as much of a good yarn as required for your entertainment. I'm trying to entertain you here, whether you're watching on Twitch, watching on YouTube, listening on some podcast, or one of my glorious and rather sexy Patreons. I'm here to entertain you. I want to do that. I don't want to educate, I want to entertain. If some of these stories spark a bit of kindling for you to go off and look into greater detail and discover that what I've been saying is bullshit, I highly approve, because that is the point. I want you to tell stories. I want to tell stories that I've heard. I want to tell you the ones that are wrong because they're are entertaining. And when it comes to telling popular myths and stories that I've heard, because there's always something extra to find, I will leave things out. Because for those of you that bother, or say bother, that makes it sound like some of you who are listening aren't putting the effort in. That's not what I mean at all, because just listening is legitimate. But for those of you that go off and want a bit more and go finding that little bit extra off your own back, whether that be reading books or searching online, but you find yourself a little bit extra, that is a sort of a gift from people like me, because there's always worth finding extras. And if I told you everything and you relied on that and didn't get any curiosity, where the fuck would we be? So, tonight we have a couple of stories for you. Well, I say we, royal we, like I'm some kind of weird monarch. I have a couple of stories for you based on some Sweet Chunks songs. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Sweet Chunks band are a comedy folk band that I have had the absolute pleasure of being a member of for the last God knows how many years, worryingly heading towards 12 years. And we've been singing songs, getting drunk, and basically yelling at people in various places for many, many years. And it's been fabulous. And we have always been attracted to strange stories. And one of the songs that, from our last album, Glutundabus, another bullshit word that we made up that sounded good, we wrote a song called the Hampshire National Anthem. This has got several stories within it that have got a lot of extra bits and pieces in that is entertaining. I haven't just taken the best bits and put them in the song and left you the B-sides and dross. There are a lot of interesting things that I left out because I couldn't fit in, and I didn't want the song to go on and on and on and on. I wanted to give you a little glint into what the song was about, the little stories within that could be expanded on for people to look into, and people have asked me about where these stories come from, whether I made them up. I did and I didn't, as I just explained earlier. They are from actual stories that I discovered about Hampshire. So why did we write the National Anthem of Hampshire? Now, some of you who already know the Sweet Chunks band have heard this patter before, so please bear with me. But for those of you that haven't seen Sweet Chunks, or haven't heard Ash, our glorious bassist, by the way, the Sweet Chunks band is myself, Aubrey, Ash Hibbs on bass, and Mike Wiles on guitar, and a selection of chums that join us every now and then, from Lizzie Morris to Charlie Brown, who plays percussion for us occasionally, and lots of other friends, including Jake Puntis, who's a brilliant guitarist who joins us every now and then. But the three of us, Mike, Ash and myself, are the core members. Ash normally does the patter, and the introduction to this is basically, we were inspired by Hampshire's entry to the 2025 City of Culture bid for Southampton, and we wanted to help because we wanted Southampton to win, because it meant there would be loads of silly stories, we could take the piss out of it, but also we could try and blag our way onto that gravy train and pretend we had something to do with it, and put it onto posters and stuff, because we are whores when it comes to advertising. So we decided to do two things to assist the bid for the 2025 City of Culture. One, we offered to bugger off when the judges turned up, and we did. We went to Hull, who was also in contention for City of Culture 2025, and we thought we could help us and also hinder them. So we did that. Part two was we thought we could sell the virtues of Southampton and the wider Hampshire area by creating the National Anthem of Hampshire, because if as a county we had our own anthem, we would be better than everyone else, because no one else has anthems, because they're shit, quite frankly. So we compiled a load of songs together and created the National Anthem of Hampshire. And because we're lunatics, we decided to play really weird keys and time signatures and stuff, because we're all metalheads, so that ends up happening in most of our songs. So we put forward the idea, we released it, we made a video, we got involved, and long and short of it, Bradford won. The city of Bradford. Brilliant. The city that's coat of arms is a burnt out Nissan Micra and a skip filled with piss. Lost to Hampshire. A county with the ancient capital of England in it, and all the things that we talked about. So many interesting stories, and yet fucking Bradford won. Anyway, not that I'm bitter. So we wrote a selection of stories and found these wonderful stories out, and there are two main ones of this. One that is complete bollocks, and one that probably is bollocks. I think you can sort of get the idea of how it works. So, first story. Let's do a little... I just realised, as this is a podcast, because I just realised as well, before I start, so I keep saying we. Why do I keep saying we? Because the voices are telling me so. I have to remember that this is going to be a video version for the lovely Twitch streamers, the YouTubers, and also it's going to be a podcast as well, so I have to remember to bear in mind that some people cannot see the glorious gesticulating I'm making with my hands. I am one of those people that basically flaps around like a bird trying to take off from a frozen lake whilst talking. That's one of those things. So I will explain. I'll do the audio descriptive version for some things when I remember, and if I'm not too drunk. So let's sort of do a little musical interlude kind of thing. I won't play a full song, but I think those things that podcasts do when they have like a sort of a. Song number 1, story 1, the Bisterne Dragon. So the first part of the song starts off with, does your county have a cool dragon? No, I thought not. No dragon for you, because your county is shit. This is a myth from Hampshire, one of two actually. I've talked about the Christchurch dragon before. Yes, that is a myth that we have. But the first one that I put in the song was called the Bisterne Dragon. This is a true myth. This is, or better to clarify that before we go forward on this Stream of Conscious podcast, vanity project, whatever the fuck this is. So when I say a true myth, what I mean is something that isn't just made up by me, it's been made up by other people and people have talked about it. So, you know, we all know about the tooth fairy. It's a load of bollocks, but we all know pretty much the lore. So it's about something that is fictional, but we all know about it, like Robin Hood or France, things like that. And so the Bisterne Dragon is one of those stories. Bisterne is a real place in Hampshire, not too far from Lyndhurst, which is down the road from Brockenhurst, which also sounds like somewhere in Redwall, because it literally means town of the badgers, which is great. And sadly, the high volume of traffic means there's not many badgers in there anymore. But when it comes to Bisterne itself, there is a lot of farmland around that area, and the story goes that in the 15th century, the 14th century, in the late 1300s, a dragon turned up and decided that it wanted to live in Bisterne. And what it started doing was threatening local farms and created itself a little protection racket where basically, if you didn't pay up, it would start eating the local produce. But what did it want? It asked for milk, specifically, which is rather odd, not really sort of consistent with what we know about dragons. Say what we know, like the breeding habits of fucking the Gruffalo or something. But he wanted specifically, they, I don't want to gender specific a dragon, but wanted milk. And as with protection rackets, as they tend to go, once you start paying it, it gets worse and worse and worse. So the first week it was 1 gallon of milk, then it was the 2 gallons of milk per week, and then 3, then 4, then 5, and then they started threatening the livestock anyway, and it became untenable. So, of course, in the great British tradition of dealing with difficult problems, how did they deal with it? Well, they wrote a strongly worded letter. I mean, that's how you deal with this shit, right? So they contacted the local magistrate and said, please, can you send some help? I don't know, a police officer with a big stick and deal with this dragon. And he replied, of course, what the fuck do you want me to do? I'm a magistrate. Do you want me to give it a parking ticket or something? You'll have to deal with it yourselves. An attitude that has pretty much stayed exactly the same from farming and the relation with the British government ever since. Ha ha! Satire. Anyway, so the locals try their best. They try all kinds of things of trying to placate it. They try getting sticks and throwing them at it. But it's a fucking great big dragon. It gives no fucks, but takes all of the milk. So they set out in a sort of like Magnificent Seven samurai kind of thing, and send out a messages in far different directions, looking for heroes or roving knights, that kind of thing, that we can't pay you much, but we can give you some money and some food and a place to stay if you get rid of this dragon for us. And naturally, people say, fuck that, it's a dragon. No. Also, some of them go, fuck that, it's fictional. Are you on crack? A tradition that has continued to this day in Hampshire. Lots of crack. Not so many dragons, though. And this message goes out far and wide for many, many months, and eventually reaches the ear of a Sir John Berkeley. Nothing to do with the bank, but all to do with the castle. This is another point where it steps its toe into reality. And what we have is Berkeley Castle, which is a real place. It's fucking nowhere near Hampshire, that's for sure. But where it sits into reality, it is the castle of the Berkeley family, and the Sir Thomas Berkeley is buried in Bristol Cathedral, which is also nowhere near fucking Berkeley Castle, but he is a real person that was recorded as living there. And he is apparently, according to the myth, the father of Sir John Berkeley, although I can't find any evidence that Sir Thomas Berkeley had any children called Thomas, or John, or anything like that, so that might be where the bullshit comes in. But interestingly enough, little fun fact, the castle mentioned in the myth of where Sir Berkeley comes from is the castle that Edmund, King Edmund, is murdered by having a red hot poker shoved up his arse when he sat on the toilet. Yes, the character from Blackadder, who is actually murdered in real life in that kind of way. That wasn't made up, that was true. Oh wow, that's like mythception. So I just talked about a Blackadder episode, which is also surprisingly accurate, about a real historical character that got murdered in a place that sent out a guy into a fictional myth at the same time. That's interesting. That's how myths seem to work. So Sir Berkeley, nothing to do with the bank, but all to do with the castle, decides he is going to fuck with this dragon's chakras and decides to shack himself up with a shitload of swords, weapons, sticks. His two favourite hunting mastiffs, called Grim and Holdfast, very metal, and decides to take a particular set of armour. Now, the evidence we've got about this story is, I think the earliest example is from the late 1500s, early 1600s, in a simple sort of manuscript about the story of the Bisterne Dragon. And this is where it's interesting because, well, actually the whole thing's fucking interesting, but this is a little bit of interesting, is that Sir Berkeley is meant to have said that he didn't come out with, he didn't get his special armour, his anti-dragon armour, commissioned. He didn't need to find a wizard, he just had anti-dragon armour. And anti-dragon armour is glass armour that's shined to a mirror shine to reflect the venom of a dragon. I don't think they quite understood how venom works back then, because apparently it's not mirrors. I'm surprised that dragon armour wasn't a raincoat or something. But not only did dragon armour exist, but he had a set in his wardrobe, loaded himself up, got onto a horse and headed down south. Now, for those of history buffs out there who get annoyed by weird inaccuracies in films, like I do, not the main sort of like, oh, they're speaking the wrong accent, or characters aren't portrayed the same way, but when they do really irritating, stupid things, like for example, when everyone who rides a horse in a historical drama fucks off at a full-on canter, or, like in Poldark, apparently old Polydarchy himself decides wherever he goes across the Devon moors, just basically goes at full pelt wherever he goes. That's how you kill horses. They can't last that long, especially when a fully grown person with all of their equipment is sat on the arse of it, travelling at full pelt for 2 hours. It would die. The way they do it is they load the horse up and the horse goes off at a leisurely pace, slow and consistent, down the road to a coaching inn. Then the coaching inn swaps your horse for another horse for a fee that travels you to the next coaching inn. And then when that horse is tired, you then keep swapping until you get to your destination, and then you come back and pick your horse up on the way through. That's how it works. Like a strange Uber kind of thing. Not like you have a horse in a sports car and fuck off at full pelt. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. These historical inaccuracies are strange hills that I'm prepared to die on, but my God, I will fucking die on that hill and I will take you all with me. Anyway, so he travels at a reasonable pace on a horse that takes several weeks to travel from Berkeley Castle back down to Hampshire. Because remember, it is technically like Uber, but they don't have Uber. So it doesn't take 4 hours, it takes weeks. Anyway, so they arrive back at the New Forest. The local people there have been trying to deal with this fucking great big dragon. He will not fuck off. But what he now has had a belly filled with milk and is probably quite spotty from the massive amount of extra lactose in his diet. Because who the fuck thought that dragons like milk? This one does. Apparently fucking loves it. We have no record of whether or not he does anything with the milk, turns it into ice cream, turns it into cream, or even makes a kind of cake or milkshake with it. Just gargles down gallon upon gallon of milk. Enter Sir Berkeley. Sir Berkeley turns up with his shiny armour and immediately builds a hide to ambush the dragon. So has the shiniest fucking armour he could get his mitts on, in fact made a thing about getting it, and then hides. He's a weird fellow. We get more into that. So he observes, if you can imagine this as well, a knight in full armour, deliberately shined up, hiding with 2 dogs in a bush, watching the dragon drink milk. He observes the dragon for a week to find their patterns of movement, where they're going to go, what's going to happen, all that kind of thing, and then waits and waits and then waits for the right moment to strike, and sends his dogs. Now, if you're fans of dogs, you won't like this because they die almost immediately. Grim and Holdfast try their best to grab hold of the dragon. The first one barks on the run, and the dragon turns around, spots it immediately, and basically crunches its skull with its arm. Or some say its face. It bites it. It's crunched it with its face. I mean, he bites it to death immediately. But that allows the second dog to latch onto its neck and cause a massive gash to appear, spreading blood all over the place. That gets into the dog, causes the dog to convulse and see weird demons and things, and then sadly die, reinforcing the point we made earlier on that dragons are poisonous as fuck. So, Sir Berkeley, incensed that his 2 trusty dogs have been murdered. Well, not murdered, they sort of died. It was really his fault, really. That's what happens when you use animals and make them to fight for your businesses. Anyway, so he then takes up his sword. He got in his mirrored armour, jumps out and runs head first at the dragon. And the story goes that they fight for a week across the New Forest, from Bisterne into Lyndhurst, right the way up into Brockenhurst, trashing all the villages at the time and leaving them to waste. The whole place is on fire, possibly undoing all the good work he could do by removing the dragon, in the same way that in those American films from the 1980s where someone is accused of a crime they didn't commit and then kills several people to prove their innocence when the crime was probably burglary. So they sort of undo any good work they do. It's like The Fugitive, but with dragons. So, actually no, he doesn't. Kimball in the film doesn't kill anyone. He's accused of it, but I digress. Anyway, so he fights the dragon. And the 2 of them are twatting each other continually, all around for a week. And then finally they return back towards Lyndhurst, heading towards Bisterne, where they all started, in a great big loop. And then Sir Berkeley twats the dragon right over the face, and blood goes absolutely everywhere, including onto the face of Sir Berkeley. And the dragon falls dead just outside the entrance to the city, the village of Lyndhurst. The knight realises he has won and prays to God and says, "Thank you for helping me destroy this." Oh no, I appear to be tripping balls. Because apparently he was voiced by Alec Guinness. Oh no, I appear to be tripping balls. The dragon's blood got into my face. And then the story goes, or one of the translations, is that he runs off into the forest, takes his kit off, this is a repeating theme in a lot of Hampshire myths, by the way, and runs around the New Forest for a month. Now, this is combined with a different myth. There's a story that there is a local person, this is a separate myth, so we're doing an aside, by the way. I wish I had a red light because I can shine on me like a theatre and go out, and this is a slightly different thing for the audience. So there is another myth that a creature is shown kindness by a local forester that sees a creature in danger and digs them up and helps them out. And then, as a thank you, this mythical creature that can run faster than the sound of a shout, I think the story goes. And then he basically says, as a thank you, ride on my back once a year, and we shall travel round the forest together. And this will make you live for longer, but also it's a jolly good laugh. And he goes, yeah, all right then. And so, yeah, every year, apparently the story goes, you can hear the sound of someone laughing his arse off, which is the mythical creature, and the bloke screaming as he travels round faster than the sound of a shout around the New Forest, goes back home and then goes to bed. This myth about the idea of you can hear the screaming, this is also combined with the Bisterne Dragon, because apparently the story is, at certain times of the year, you can hear the deluded screamings and rantings of a knight off their tits. But nowadays, as I've said before, there's a lot of crack in Southampton, so it's probably just a crackhead somewhere in a car park yelling as they fire a flare gun into the air. But yeah, so anyway, so he's travelling around and then returns after 14 days, tripping balls, because he's a big fella. It should have killed him, but he just kept on travelling around and staggers back and then finds the dead body of the dragon who he defeated and then just collapses on him and dies. And the story goes that the body of the dragon becomes a hill, and upon that hill the remains of the knight Sir Berkeley turns into an elm tree. And that tree and that hill is still there. Outside of Lyndhurst is a little hill called Bolton's Bench with an epic looking tree on the top of it. And that is the story of that tree is meant to be the remains of Sir Berkeley. And the 2 dogs, there's little epilogues, and that's the story of the Bisterne Dragon and the Knight, but the 2 dogs have a much better memorial in my opinion. Bisterne Manor still exists. It wasn't built at the time, it was still a set of farms, but one of the areas became more affluent once they repaired everything after the 2 twats went on a rampage and got high and smashed everything. The area got a manor, Bisterne Manor, and above the doors are 2 dogs, Grim and Holdfast, that are memorials to the brave dogs that fought mythically, as in they probably didn't even exist, to fight the Bisterne Dragon. And the dragon itself has a little memorial as well, where there is a Green Dragon pub, in the New Forest that is apparently, so they say, named after the Bisterne Dragon. And the epithet, and as you noticed, that was about 3 endings, which leads me nicely to the end of Lord of the Rings, because apparently the Green Dragon in the New Forest was the name and the pub that inspired Tolkien, who apparently was on the piss at some point in the New Forest, saw the Green Dragon and decided that was the name of the pub that he was going to give to Hobbiton. So there is the story of the Bisterne Dragon. Story 2, Operation Cone of Power. The second verse of the national anthem of Hampshire features a song. It features the story of Operation Cone of Power. I don't mention the name in the song because to explain the name would have taken longer than to explain the general premise of the witches. So the chorus is, does your county have Nazi fighting witches? No, I thought not. No naked witches for you, 'cause your county is shit. This is another perilously close to true story, much more likely than one of a fucking dragon in it, but the problem is it was written by a bullshitter, so much like myself. So it could be true, but realistically it's probably not. And by true, I don't mean, I'm not casting any assertions to the idea of the belief of the witches using their power to fuck with Hitler. That's not the debate. It's whether or not they had this ritual. So, for those of you that aren't Wicca or witches, you may not know what a cone of power is. Now, a cone of power, roughly, this is again an idiot who's found out about the stories. They're probably in this chat, there's going to be a lot more witches and wizards in there that probably have a much better understanding of it than me. Will be able to explain a cone of power better. But the simplified version is that it is a spell used by a coven of witches to channel the power of the earth and the spirits of those involved in a powerful circle to channel energy into a single cone, into a beam, to influence another thing, whether it be the weather, whether it be a person, or the national lottery, whatever you want to do. It's a combination of powerful beings focused on one task. So there is a story that comes from a chap called Gerald Gardner, which is a smashing name. He was a civil servant in the 1920s and 30s, and at that time, as was a lot of people, he was very interested in spiritualism. So the height of spiritualism in the UK really kicked off, actually a lot of the Western world I suppose, particularly in the UK, was after the First World War, because we forget how much of a major impact the First World War was compared with what had gone before. At the end of the Second World War, people are kind of used to the idea that, wow, humanity's a big pile of shit and treats other human beings like crap. Isn't it fucking awful? And so they were used to it. But after the First World War, wars were generally pick a field, get dressed in colourful uniforms and twat each other until someone gets bored, and then we'll have an end time, and then we'll tot up who's dead and then work out how much money we have to pay as compensation for the losing side. Or, of course, it's in a colonial sense, you get all your greatest warriors, you stand together to fight oppression, and then the Europeans that were fighting you would get a machine gun out and kill you all. So this new kind of warfare completely changed the mindset, not just of warfare, but what affected people. And naturally, with the high volume, is particularly in the United Kingdom, people forget as well that the British, the French and the Germans had a ridiculously high death count. It wasn't, not in a case of the percentage of the soldiers that went over and fought and died was high, because it was actually about 10%, which is of the serving soldiers actually died or were wounded. It's surprisingly low, but it's the numbers of those people, because remember, it was the biggest mobilized force in human history at that point, and so 10% of 3 million is a load of people at one point, and with that be year by year, so the amount of people that passed away was huge. And many communities, it's one of those things that we hear a lot, but sometimes it's worth reconnecting with that thought when you think about it, is that every community, every street had someone that died. It doesn't even come into the account when you think about it of the people who were wounded, but also the people who served, saw terrible things, but were able to function, I suppose is the best way of saying it. So this war reached people more ways than ever before in human history. So naturally, people wanted to connect with the dead. There must be something better. There must be a new way of doing this. Maybe we have lost connection with the world. Look at referencing Lord of the Rings earlier on. One of the things that Tolkien talks about is a disconnect with the natural world, and the fact that the reason Mordor is so evil, because it is very fucking automated and machine-like in life and death, rather than it being of any kind of nobility. I'm not saying that murdering people has nobility in it, but there definitely wasn't any in the First World War. But people had an interest in something different. And this is why things like spiritualism and Wicca and Wiccans and Druidism all starts coming up and it starts taking a real interest. And Gerald Gardner was one of these people. Some people refer to him as there's someone who created the modern Wicca and rebranded it and rebuilt it. But it strikes me of when you read what he got up to, either as male washing or very much he's a nice guy from the alternative scene that's a little bit creepy, if you know what I mean. That doesn't mean I'm going to discount what he's talking about. I'm saying that as a piece of sort of storytelling seasoning to bear in mind that the source that we've got is potentially very, very biased in a particular way, outdated, and in fact the slant should be more towards the women. But to be fair to a lot of his talks and his books, he does talk about the coven doing this, not him. He didn't come in and go, I did it, in an Aleister Crowley kind of way. If you know your Aleister Crowley stories, very much me, Aleister Crowley. But Gerard Gardner has gone to the forefront as a chap. It's surrounded by women who are mystics, but he's trying to champion them. So there's some good, there's some bad. Bear that in mind when you hear the story. So Gerard Gardner had heard this story that I'm just referring to the dates because I'm good at remembering overall stories, but I'm rubbish at remembering exact dates. So it says in 1588, when the Spanish Armada turned up, there's a brilliant story apparently where Sir Francis Drake met up with some sea witches off the coast of Plymouth, of Plymouth Point, called what's it called, Devil's Point, and got a load of wizards and witches to create an unfavourable storm that made the Armada fuck up, which is quite nice and apocryphal. But apparently another group got together in 1804 to piss Napoleon Bonaparte. So Gerard thought, you know what, Hitler's a bit of a shit like these people, maybe we should do something, and found a group of women called the New Forest Coven, who we're not sure whether they actually existed or not, whether or not that's because he had this group of women, knew that they would be ridiculed or looked down on by their local community if this sort of thing came out, so made the name up, changed the names, or changed where it happened, because he said it happened in Highcliffe in the New Forest. So we don't know exactly whether it was just bullshit of a nice story, continuing the myth kind of thing, or whether or not he's doing it to tell something that actually happened. I like to think it actually happened, but we lost touch with who these people are. So what the story is that on the wonderfully Lammas Eve, or Loafmas Eve, which is August the 1st for all you Christian festival people, is the celebration of the first bits of harvest, where you basically make some bread, get pissed and have a good time to go, look, the harvest has begun, we're not going to starve yet. And Loafmas basically is, bread party effectively. So this massive bread party is going on elsewhere, but these ladies decide they're going to fuck with Hitler's chakras. Gerard says that he got found out about these women and was learning from them, and they were going to do this, they decided to do this, and he was there to observe. There's another story that says that Gerard contacted the War Office to say, would you chaps mind if we try to fuck with Hitler's brain? We're going to give it a jolly good shot, and we don't want to upset any plans you've got, so if it's a problem, do tell us, otherwise we'll just crack on. And apparently the War Office went, no, I mean, give it a shot, why not? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? His head explode? Oh no. And so apparently the story goes that they send someone from the War Office to the location that Gerard Gardner pointed out and observed them. So if you can imagine some chap from the army or the navy just sitting there with a roll up, just watching what I'm about to describe, going, what the fuck is going on? So what did happen? So late at night, the New Forest Coven gather, and there are about, the story goes, between 12 and 20 women. They gather in a circle and form a cone of power. And of course, because it's Wiccan and they like their shit freaky, this can only be done completely in the buff, meaning our chum from the Royal Navy is having a cracking time. So these women come together and they chant for hours and hours and hours, focusing their energy, focusing the power of the New Forest to put an idea into Hitler's head, which is, you shall not cross the ocean. And that is the words they apparently say, you shall not cross the ocean, you shall not cross the ocean, you shall not cross the ocean. Apparently every now and then going, you fucking dick, you shall not cross the ocean. Possibly where, who do you think you are kidding Mr. Hitler came from? Because imagine if you put that into that song, it makes it more catchy than you shall not cross the ocean. And the reason I like to think it might have happened is because if it did, the next part is tragic because we don't know who the person is. If it didn't happen, it's just a fun story. But if there's a chance that it did, I think we need to remember it because it is still a casualty of war, whether you think they had any power over Hitler or not. The story goes that sadly, because they're not all young, that some of these ladies were in their 60s, 70s and even 80s, that two of them succumbed to hypothermia and sadly died a few days later. And so, as much as it's probably a load of bollocks, if it is true, that whether or not you think they had any difference, I think it's worth raising a glass to any old ladies that decided, for king and country, to fuck with Hitler's chakras by taking their kit off in the middle of the New Forest as two weird old men look on as on a day when everyone else is having a party with some bread, when you could be having some bread and some soup, and instead you're fighting Hitler. Fair play. And, chin chin for them. But it's just a marvellously silly but beautiful image that some people with a very alternative faith that has been neglected in this country up to that point as well, with the persecution of witches and various things, that they decided with all seriousness within the belief system that they had, that it was their duty to fight for this country in a way that they knew how, which was summoning the power of the universe to fuck with Hitler's chakras. And there's a marvellous quote from Gerard Gardner, which I hope is true, because it's marvellous. They met and raised the great cone of power and directed the thought to Hitler's brain, you cannot cross the sea. Just as their great-grandfathers and grandmothers had done to Bonaparte, or he says Boney, so old Boney, and their remote forefathers and foremothers had done to the Spanish Armada. I'm not saying that they did stop Hitler from invading, but the power of force that they put to it must have surely, if it did reach him, must have put the fright up on him and would have definitely made him reconsider, which is absolutely marvellous. So, and that is the story of Operation Cone of Power. Oh. For those listening on the podcast, and seriously old 40-year-old person, their bones are creaking and is trying not to sound overweight. The rest of the stories that go along in National Anthem of Hampshire, lots of small little nuggets that you may have missed in the song, and there's some things that we wanted to put in with a bit more detail. For example, there is a goat called McGinty, which was the world's oldest goat for many years, lived in Hampshire very happily, sadly died before the making of the song. And then there was a chap called Frank who worked for Blue Star Buses, who was the world's according to Guinness Book of Records, the world's shortest professional bus driver. And he worked in Southampton for many years and sadly died before the podcast. I then discovered that obviously one of the things that people think about Southampton is of course the Titanic. I didn't want to put the Titanic in because who gives a shit about that? We've heard enough about it, where everyone died. And then there was also another boat, famously, that went out from Portsmouth Harbour, and then during the Spanish Armada, when our lady friends in the Cone of Power, well, their ancestors were fucking with the King Philip of Spain chakras, the Mary Rose decided in an earlier encounter to just sink, scaring the shit out of the French. And then, of course, there is the story of Netley Abbey, which was one of the abbeys that was destroyed by Henry VIII, and was so angry about it, it decided to start regularly killing builders that would do work on it to dismantle it. So the story goes that masonry fell and killed builders during the Reformation, and then in later years recounts of injuries only happening to people responsible for the site, so some bishops and also local councillors, but particularly builders who were trying to pull it down. So the point where nowadays, even when doing repair work, small rituals have to be done to not irritate the building. What I love about this is that it's not a ghost at Netley Abbey, it's the abbey itself. They offer drink, because they're not sure what works and what doesn't, because it's a fucking building. What is a building like? Mortar? Well, literally on the rocks, I suppose. So whenever they do repairs, they do little ceremonies of offering food and drink in the abbey. This is a wonderful thing, which they're not sure if it works or not. And then while doing the work, literally talking out loud, saying, I'm just going to repair this. I'm putting scaffolding to fix it. I'm not taking anything away, because it came to a head in the I believe it's the 1800s, when there was a final decision to actually take the building down and turn it into a house, where the chief builder was killed by a lintel that should have actually been perfectly stable and shouldn't have been an issue, and fell and killed him. So then people realised, you know what, it's not worth it. Let's just fucking leave it. Let's just leave the building. It's clearly cursed. And then I realised there's a lot of death in this song, isn't there? So the Bisterne Dragon is a dragon, 2 dogs, and a knight dying quite horribly if we think about it. 2 sad, brave old British patriotic women witches dying of hypothermia. Frank dying of old age. McGinty dying of old age. A fucking builder dying because of a lintel falling on him. Many people dying due to nautical related fucking issues in and around Southampton. So I realised the anthem of Hampshire is actually a massive, great big anthem of death. Which is nice. And it made me think, is that why they gave it to the city of Bradford? Because they thought us down here in Hampshire were a little bit morbid. Death. Yeah, I got nothing from that really. It's basically, it just seems like all of the stories around Hampshire, the famous ones, are about death. And the last one I'll remember is in fact, this will be a sort of a little lead-in for potentially a story for next time, is that there is, on top of, near Woolston, there is a church. And in that church, on Pear Tree Green, is a grave for a young boy that was eaten at sea that completely changed the legal system in the UK. About what happens when you get shipwrecked. But more about that another time. Unless I forget. Never mind. Does your county have lots of death? No, I thought not. No dead people for you, 'cause your county is Hove. My friends, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I'd like to offer a toast to you all for all 20 of you who've been listening to this show pretty much all the way through. And those of you who've downloaded this stream, whether it's the audio or watching on YouTube, thank you so very much, because this is the sort of thing that I want to do a lot more of, because I discover wonderfully weird stories in my travels. They won't all be about Hampshire. They won't all be about death. I'll try to be a bit more cheery next time. Although I did just say the first one I'm going to tell you about is someone being literally eaten alive. But I'm going to find stories from all over the place and share with you every month, at the last Monday of each month. And I hope you guys come back and join me again. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we go. I have a little sip of my drink. The host drinks from his cup. That's the audio description version. So, thank you very much for joining me this evening. As for those of you on stream, I have been in the chat window. I have seen you guys have been messaging. What I'm going to do after all these podcast streams, vanity projects or whatever, after I record, I'm going to stick around and answer a load of questions that people put up. I have a little chat online with the chatters. So if you are listening to this on the podcast or if you're watching this on YouTube, consider coming and joining us on Twitch. First Monday of every month at 9 o'clock. Come and subscribe, all that sort of stuff, and join in the chat afterwards, or just say really weird things and have lovely conversations with the lovely people in the chat, because the bits I have been seeing, I've seen several Lord of the Rings references, lots of weird things, talking about pubs and Satan and other such things. So it's becoming a bit of a mess already. Oh, and people seem to be summoning the devil in the chat window. Smashing. So there is that. Coming up, I said earlier on that I'm a musician, and if you'd like to come and join me, I hope you do, because I try and do this sort of thing in the stories and songs and other such things, whether I'm doing it with Sweet Chunks, whether I'm doing it comparing or various other things, and I've got a lot coming up because it's the festive period, because we're recording this on the 25th of November. So, coming up on the 30th of November, I am playing Give a Gift in Southampton at the Hobbit, where I'm going to be playing some really weird Christmas songs, including one about how we summon Lemony back from the dead. What is it with death at the moment? But anyway, it must be the time of the season. Then I'm playing a gig with the Sweet Chunks band in at the Brunswick in Hove, that's near Brighton, with Tom B. Wild, which is smashing. There are still tickets available for that. Do come and join us on the 4th of December. On the 14th of December, another Saturday, it's the Exeter Yule Ball, which is always smashing. There's going to be some delightful apparently I'm comparing this, so there's going to be some delightful costumes and all such things. That's at the Exeter Phoenix. There are still tickets available. Do come and join us. And then it is the 22nd of December. I am doing a little Christmas gig in Southampton at the Waterloo. Free entry if you want to come and join us. I'm going to try and do record it for you lovely Patreons out there, and for you guys on stream. With some weird Christmassy stories that I might show. But then again, I might make life easier, because the next show is going to be on Monday the 23rd of December. So you know what I'll do is I'll put together a load of Christmassy stories that I found, some really weird ones, and I'll tell you the story about that guy that was eaten to death that changed the story around, because that's very festive. Probably turned out he was died on Christmas or something. So we'll do that. So next Monday the 23rd of December will be my next Aubrey story time, the last story time of 2024, which is only the second of the story times. So do come in if you want to join us. Again, if you're listening on the podcast and listen on YouTube, do come and join us, join the stream, join the madness, and we'll have a chat and other such things. If you want to hear what I do during the week, every week, where I basically try where I basically talk about all the things that have distracted me from actually doing work, join my Fizzy Brain stream, which is on Twitch every single Tuesday at 9 o'clock, where I basically just share what I'm meant to be working on, and then the weird stuff I have been working on, like weird masks. And also, I don't know if you can see them up here, these are the different dragons that have been made by audiences and such like that, which is great. So there's lots of crafting, lots of weird things, and that will eventually come up on YouTube. But you want to see it first, come down and join us on Patreon. Sorry, I meant to say, for the audio description out there, I was just pointing at a shelf covered in very weird masks and other things I've made, and hopefully you can see them at some point if you go on YouTube. Right, so that is the some of the housekeeping. Find me on Bluesky, Threads, fuck Twitter. I'm on Faceache, Instagram, and Bandcamp. If you just search for Aubrey Blakely, you'll find me. I'm the only bugger with that name, because I'm an idiot and name myself in a really weird way. Find the Sweet Chunks Band on Spotify, and follow the Sweet Chunks Band and Aubrey Blakely on YouTube, where there is other such bits and pieces. And if you feel like supporting this madhouse, join us on Patreon. There is a free tier where you get updates of all the various bits and pieces, so you don't have to keep on searching for me across the different platforms. And if you would do me the honour of throwing me some money, I will throw you all kinds of good little tasty bits and treats and other such things, including early editions of this podcast and other such things as, well, like I say, follow us on Twitch for a post-stream chat, is what I was trying to say. I can't speak. It might be all the cider I'm drinking. So, and which I'm going to be involved in now. So thank you very much for listening to the stream, you lovely people. If you're listening, if you're downloading and streaming, thank you very much. I will see you at the next show, whether it be Fizzy Brain on Tuesdays or the next Aubrey's Storytime on the 23rd of December, or at a festival or in a field or on a show. So tatty bye and cheers. Thank you very much. The audio description, the host lists his tankard up and then puts it in his face. In fact, let's just do the thing I say on stage. If you have a drink in your hand, raise it up and put it in your face. Good night. Wonderful. Twitch friends, thank you very much. I do apologise for not reading the chat as I'm going along. I end up getting derailed too much. So if you've not seen my show before, on the Fizzy Brain thing stream, I do chat as I go along. But when it comes to these story things, I'll catch up with our little chat at the end. So let's have a quick look. See how we're getting on. Hello, Ed. Oh, you did get the first one. Well done. I'm not really a musician. I don't wear jeans. This is one of the handy things about the chats. You lovely friends here. If you've got to head off, feel free. No worries. I understand you're here for the whole thing because chatting to a chat might be weird for some people. But if you do stay along, thank you very much. Yeah, one of the great things about the chat is that I forget half the crap that I come out with when I say stuff, particularly on stage. So having people write things down afterwards is really useful. I can check what horrible things I've said about myself. So yeah, I'm not really a musician. I don't wear jeans. I might have to sort of put that on my posters. I think I'm not really a singer-songwriter. I don't wear jeans. Ella Jody, good evening. The modern day Barbie thing. That's lovely. Freeborn Owl, I hope one of them features an island off the coast of Ecuador. You know what? I will be telling this. That reminds me of obviously of the saga of Lonesome George. There's lots of little stories that have come out from that, including a couple of songs we've written, including the story of Diego. But I think there's a couple of stories about the Galapagos Islands that I've heard about. So potentially for another show, maybe in the new year, I will tell you the stories about the Galapagos, including more depth on Lonesome George and Diego, who features on Glutton of Us, an album that's available right now. And some stories about Judas goats that I need to tell you about if you haven't heard about them already. Ella's saying, you shouting at people as part of the charm of Sweet Chunks. Yeah, I think so. Release the long version. If I released the long version of any of my songs, it'd be a month longer. What I heard about that bit on the radio said, what culture crackheads? Yeah, I get that. Yeah, when you heard about the City of Generation Rainbows, when I heard about the City of Culture bit, we did think that ourselves. Like, we just have crackheads, but there's also some nice buildings and crackheads. Come up for the I should have come up to Durham, really, shouldn't I? He just had dragon-proof armour in his wardrobe, as if we all don't. Yeah, I know. I think more of us should have dragon-proof armour in their wardrobe. It's a funny thing. Like I didn't mention in the show because it was one of those things of like trying to work out what parts of the story to mention. Is so the Bisterne Dragon. There's a couple of transcripts of it from the 1500s and it retranslated in the 1600s, and it's really short. It's only a couple of paragraphs long. But it basically, one of the things it talks about in one of the later versions is about this idea of this dragon-proof armour. But the thing that I do find funny about it is it indicates that he just has that. He's not said that he's a dragon fighter specialist. He just has that in his armoury. Like the fact that a lot of us have cycle helmets just in case we need to go cycling, even though we're not professional cyclists, if you know what I mean. It's just bizarre. Who gave the dragon all the milk? Who? Yeah, who? Her milkshake brings the dragons to the yard. Oh, fuck, I'm glad I didn't see that during the show, because that would have made me piss myself in the stream. And he was the fastest milk runner in the... Yes. Hello, Wispy Beard. Trying to catch up. You can keep your fancy ales, you can keep by the flagon, but only one brew for the brave and true comes at the green dragon. In the New Forest, as we discovered. Have actually drank in the New Forest. Yeah, it's funny with that. I love that. Talking about the... Sorry, for those, if you come on later. Nikki was saying of having a drink in the Green Dragon. I love, and Ed as well, I love, one of the greatest things about this country is, and Ireland's the same, is our connection with our our folklore and our pubs. So you can find a pub where a historical figure spent the night or something like that. I was going through Winchester for a gig not too long ago, and there's just a casual thing. This chapel was built by William the Conqueror when he first turned up, and it's just these lovely connections